Islands often come to symbolize realms of extremes. They stand in for utopias, limbo, or the ultimate dream getaways. When it comes to mythological islands, utopias are pretty popular. The Greeks had their Fortunate Isles, or Isles of the Blessed, where the most fortunate mortals spent their days drinking and reveling. The Irish had a similar concept with their Mag Mell, or Plain of Honey, an island paradise where gods frolicked and only the brave mortals occasionally visited. With that in mind, here are some of the most mythical ancient islands that might actually exist. Isle of the Demons. The ominously titled Isle of the Demons appeared on multiple maps from the 16th and 17th centuries, but it remained untouched for decades due to the common belief that wicked spirits dwelled there. According to old accounts, the Isle of the Demons was lush and visually stunning, but left uninhabited because of bloodthirsty wild creatures and spirits that attacked passing vessels and wandering souls. Legends claim that these spirits spoke in bizarre tongues and haunted visitors with bone-chilling hallucinations. One map from 1508 includes an inscription next to the island that reads, "Demons attacked ships in this region which were avoided, but not without danger." The Isle of the Demons also appears on high-profile maps created by Gastaldi, Christopher Columbus, and Marco Polo, offering weight to claims about the island's reality, even if its terrifying residents remained in doubt. In the mid-16th century, while en route to Quebec, a French vessel made a stop at the Isle of the Demons to abandon a French noblewoman and a young man she had an affair with, as punishment for their scandal. The expectation was that the demons would deal with them. The woman, Marguerite de la Roque, became pregnant and gave birth on the island, surviving with her lover for several years. Together they built a crude shelter and hunted local wildlife, but were consistently tormented at night by endless, inhuman wails. Their child died, likely from starvation, as did the man and Marguerite's maid. Marguerite herself was eventually rescued by local fishermen after 2 years of solitude, and she lived to recount her eerie tale, contributing to the Isle of the Demons' infamous reputation. By the mid-1600s, the Isle of the Demons had vanished from most maps. Its actual whereabouts remain uncertain, though most place it somewhere near Newfoundland or among the scattered islands across the Strait of St. Lawrence. Quirpon Island is commonly viewed as its present-day equivalent. Others suggest that Marguerite and her companions were actually left at Harrington Harbor in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, where Marguerite is believed to have sheltered in a rocky cave, now named after her. Well, in reality, no one knows the real story. Hvadramanland. There are countless tales of locations once believed to be pure myth, only to later reveal far more depth than anyone initially assumed. Hvadramanland, also referred to as Great Ireland or White Man's Land, is one such example. Among the most prominent and influential of ancient Norse chronicles are the Saga of Eric the Red and the Saga of the Greenlanders. These texts reference the island of Hvadramanland, said to be located 6 days' sail west of Ireland, or possibly near Vinland, the name once used for the coastal stretches of eastern North America. In the Saga of Eric the Red, the inhabitants of Hvadramanland are portrayed as being clad entirely in white, who reportedly cried out loudly, carried tall poles, and wore fringed garments. Another reference notes the presence of albinism, describing them as having hair and skin as white as snow. Daticus Mercator, the Flemish geographer and mapmaker who produced one of the earliest world maps, also referenced a similar territory in a 1577 letter to John Dee, the English scholar and occultist. In his note to Dee, Mercator recounts a 14th century tale in which 8 men arrived in Norway from a far-off land, claiming to descend from an expedition led by the legendary British King Arthur, and asserting themselves as his 5th-generation heirs. The exact whereabouts of the fabled Hvadramanland remains a topic of academic speculation, with multiple theories placing it along the eastern coast of North America. Carl Christian Raffnan pointed to the Chesapeake Bay area, drawing from Shawnee legends that spoke of white men wielding iron tools. But historian Farley Mowat provides a deeper theory, situating the island along the western edge of Newfoundland. According to Mowat, early settlers from the northern British Isles, called the Albans, reached Iceland, Greenland, and North America long before the Vikings. These Albans, believed to be the displaced Neolithic natives of Britain, were driven by the invading Celts to Europe's far northwestern edges. Mowat claims they were adept walrus ivory hunters, a skill that led them to Newfoundland for its fertile land and abundant walrus population. He argues that the Albans had arrived in Newfoundland centuries prior to the Viking Age, and that their coastal settlements on the island's southwest side directly influenced later Norse exploration. The Norse, familiar with the area as Hvadramanland, may have launched expeditions like those led by Leif Erikson to raid it, only to encounter resistance or defeat. These Albanians likely maintained communication with Europe into the early medieval period, but those links were severed by the 14th century as European pirates forced them inland, where they eventually merged with other local groups. Mowat's theory paints a compelling picture, placing the Albans and Hvadramanland at the center of a forgotten chapter of pre-Columbian transatlantic exploration and settlement in the New World. What do you think about it? Rups Nigra. Rups Nigra, or the Black Rock, was a legendary monolith believed to be located at the magnetic North Pole. The myth comes from the now-lost manuscript Inventio Fortunata, chronicled by a 14th century Franciscan monk from Oxford and presented to the King of England around 1360. Its details were later summarized by Jacobus Knoyen, whose writings influenced the Flemish cartographer Daticus Mercator. In a 1577 letter, Mercator described Rups Nigra as follows: "In the center of four lands lies a great whirlpool. Water spirals inward and vanishes underground as if poured through a funnel. Directly beneath the pole," he wrote, "stands a single bare rock in the middle of the sea, made entirely of magnetic stone." Rups Nigra was said to span 33 miles in diameter and was featured on various 16th and 17th century maps. The myth was seen as a possible explanation for why compass needles point north. This super immense black stone was thought to possess powerful magnetic properties. It was also described as towering into the sky, as high as the clouds, and easily recognized due to its dark, gleaming surface. Mercator placed it prominently at the center of his 16th century map of the North Pole, the first of its kind. Mercator's vivid, almost biblical descriptions of Rups Nigra included lands inhabited by 4-foot-tall pygmies. This inspired explorers, geographers, and map-makers alike to chase after the mysterious stone, following their compass needles to Earth's frozen summit in hopes of finding the world's largest magnetic formation. Later findings revealed Mercator's flair for dramatics and possibly borrowing from older sources, but the legend of Rups Nigra as the true north endured. Though no massive black rock has ever been found at the magnetic North Pole, the pole itself is 100% real and constantly moving. This motion results from the swirling outer core of Earth, composed of molten metal. As heat rises from the planet's inner core and interacts with its rotation, it creates electric currents that form shifting magnetic fields. These dynamic flows of molten metal cause the magnetic poles to drift approximately 6 to 9 miles every year. Historical records and geophysical data place the magnetic North Pole near Melville Island in the Arctic Ocean during the early 1600s, around the time Mercator's map sparked widespread fascination with Rups Nigra. Now let's move to Avalon. The mythical land of Avalon is a central setting in Arthurian legend, depicted as the enchanted island where the sword Excalibur was forged and where King Arthur was taken to recover after being mortally wounded at the Battle of Camlan. Avalon is deeply woven into Celtic mythology and is frequently associated with arcane rituals and figures like the sorceress Morgan Le Fay, who is often portrayed as the island's guardian. Geoffrey of Monmouth, who later became the Bishop of St. Asaph, referred to Avalon as the Isle of Apples, describing it as a land brimming with fruit trees, possibly derived from Welsh, Cornish, or Breton origins, where the word aval means apple. This idea ties into broader Celtic and Gaelic myths of otherworldly islands overflowing with apples, suggesting a recurring mythical theme of paradise islands among the ancient Britons. The most prominent contender for Avalon's real-world inspiration is the town of Glastonbury, located in Somerset, England, an area famously known for its sprawling apple orchards. While Glastonbury isn't an island by definition, it was once encircled by marshes and sits on elevated terrain, which may have given it the illusion of being an island long ago. Glastonbury Abbey also carries heavy Arthurian symbolism, further supporting this theory. The link between Avalon and Glastonbury emerged from medieval traditions, particularly from 12th century claims made by monks eager to benefit from the rising popularity of Arthurian tales. In 1190, these monks announced they had discovered King Arthur's remains buried in Glastonbury, declaring it to be Avalon. This connection was strengthened by their supposed discovery of Arthur's tomb, which attracted floods of pilgrims to the site. Though many historians now believe the inscription and burial were fabricated, the association between Glastonbury and Avalon became permanently etched into cultural memory, with Glastonbury still proudly referred to as the ancient Avalon. Antilia. Legend tells that during the 8th century, 7 Christian bishops fleeing the Islamic conquest of Spain loaded their livestock and followers onto ships and sailed westward into the unknown. Eventually, the 7 bishops and their fleets arrived at a mysterious island that came to be known as Antilia. There they settled, and each bishop founded his own city, which gave the island its second name, the Isle of 7 Cities. Though it may seem like a mere myth, the island of Antilia is mentioned in records as early as 1367. One account describes a massive statue erected on its coast, meant to scare off any would-be intruders. A tale from the early 15th century tells of a Portuguese ship blown off course during a storm, which landed on the island. There, the sailors met locals who took them to a church, yet the crew couldn't shake the eerie feeling they were being watched with ill intent and rushed back to their vessel. Upon returning to Portugal, they discovered that nearly 1/3 of the sand samples collected from Antilia's beach were laced with gold. This revelation is thought to have fed into the later Spanish fables about the 7 cities of gold. Writings from various explorers, especially those chasing riches, contain equally odd stories about encounters with Antilia. The island is clearly drawn on a 1424 map and appears in several naval records throughout the rest of the 15th century, though references to it slowly faded with time. As mentions of Antilia dwindled, many began to assume the island was nothing more than a myth, lumping it in with other legendary realms like Atlantis and the Isles of the Blessed from ancient Greek poetry. Yet, despite being labeled a phantom island, some researchers believe Antilia may have been hiding in plain sight all along. Its consistent size and appearance across old maps have led scholars to speculate that it might represent a real landmass. Some believe that Antilia's location and shape closely resemble the Americas, adding further support to theories of pre-Columbian voyages across the Atlantic. Iaa. In ancient Greek legend, Iaa was the enchanted island home of the sorceress and goddess Circe. The island famously appears in Homer's epic The Odyssey, where Odysseus recounts spending a year there charmed by Circe during his journey back to Ithaca. It's also where Circe gives him guidance on using the north wind to sail the seas on his path to the underworld. Later Roman writers identified the island with Mount Circe, located on Italy's western coast, southwest of Rome. Though surrounded by water and marshlands, it's a narrow peninsula, although it may have been a true island in Homer's era. Archaeologists discovered a cave on this cape and named it Grotta della Maga Circe, the Cave of the Sorceress. This may have served as Circe's winter refuge. Another cave on the nearby island of Ponza is also believed to have been her fabled seasonal dwelling. While many of the locations mentioned in Homer's famous epics can be tied to real geographic places, Iaa stands out as a mystical retreat for a sorceress, like something from a classic fairy tale. In the stories, lions and wolves stroll calmly around like obedient pets, a vision far removed from natural behavior. Iaa also appears in other literary works, including Richard Aldington's 1933 novel All Men Are Enemies, and John Banville's 1993 book Ghosts. Bayan. In Slavic mythology, the island of Bayan is imagined as a hidden paradise. It's the celestial home of the sun and the winds and is believed to be the birthplace of all weather. Every plant known to the world is said to grow there. Unfortunately for seekers of this paradise, Bayan has a tendency to vanish and reappear at will. To make it even more alluring, Bayan is said to house at its center a mythical white stone called a latter. This stone supposedly marks the core of the universe, and from it flow magical rivers that can cure any illness or injury. It's believed that whoever discovers a latter will gain eternal happiness. Before setting sail in search of Bayan, one should be warned it's fiercely guarded. A mythical bird named Gagana, with talons of steel and a beak forged from iron, stands watch alongside a powerful enchanted serpent. So, is it real? Tir na Nog. Ireland's west coast holds a rich legacy of mythical islands, and one of the most cherished among them is Tir na Nog, the land of eternal youth. On this island there is no illness, no suffering, and no hunger. Mead and ale pour freely, and everyone lives in joy. Apparently, hangovers are not part of the experience either. One popular legend surrounding Tir na Nog centers on the Irish warrior Oisin. Neem, a radiant maiden from the island, was passing by when Oisin caught sight of her and instantly fell in love. Riding a magical horse, he traveled with her to Tir na Nog. Oisin stayed on the island for what felt like a single year, but eventually he yearned to return home. Neem gave him another enchanted steed, one that could bring him to his homeland and then back to her. There was only one condition: he must never dismount or allow his feet to touch the earth. Upon returning to the world of men, Oisin saw a group of peasants struggling to lift a heavy stone. Acting out of kindness and forgetting the warning, he stepped off his horse to help. The moment his feet touched the ground, he aged instantly, becoming an old man in seconds. 1 year in Tir na Nog, it turns out, equals centuries in the mortal realm. If you found this video interesting, like these mythical ancient islands, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you very soon.